Marcus Cole slammed his fist against the steering wheel so hard the dashboard cracked. The termination letter sat on the passenger seat. 12 years of perfect service, and they were cutting him loose in 7 days. His phone lit up. A photo from Zoe, his 7-year-old daughter, her gap-toothed smile, holding a drawing that read, "My daddy is the strongest man in the world." His chest caved in. He had 7 days left to be employed. He had a daughter who needed surgery he couldn't afford. And in 3 hours, a blizzard would force him to make a decision that would change everything. Because the woman he was about to pull from a frozen car owned the very company that just fired him. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. And if this hits you in the chest the way it hit me, subscribe and follow this channel. You don't want to miss what happens next. Marcus Cole had driven through storms before. 20 years behind the wheel teaches a man what weather can do. But this wasn't weather. This was a punishment. The wind hit the side of his rig like a freight train, shoving 18 tons of steel toward the guardrail. Marcus gripped the wheel with both hands and held his lane. His knuckles were pale against his dark skin. The wipers couldn't keep up. Snow came at the windshield like it had a personal grudge. His phone buzzed on the dash mount. He glanced at it. A text from Denise, his neighbor. "Zoe's asleep. She asked me to tell you she loves you. Drive safe, Marcus." He exhaled hard. His daughter was the only reason any of this mattered. The long hauls, the lonely nights, the empty truck stops where nobody looked him in the eye. Everything he did was for that little girl sleeping in a warm bed 60 miles south of nowhere. But tonight, even that wasn't enough to stop the weight pressing down on him. 7 days. That's what the letter said. 7 days until his position at North Hall Logistics was dissolved due to restructuring. 12 years. Not a single late delivery. Not one accident. Not one complaint. And they gave him a piece of paper that smelled like printer ink and corporate cowardice. He'd read it twice at the loading dock that morning, standing in the cold while other drivers passed by without a word. Nobody said sorry. Nobody said anything. That's how it works when you're the guy they forget exists until they need someone to blame. Marcus had called the regional office from the parking lot. He got Rick Lawson, the operations manager. The man didn't even let him finish a sentence. "It's not personal, Cole. Company's trimming dead weight. You're in a redundant route. Nothing I can do." "Redundant?" Marcus had said, his voice tight. "I've run this corridor for 12 years. I know every mile of it. And the algorithm says a consolidated route saves us 14%. It's done. You've got 7 days to finish your current haul. After that, turn in your keys." The line went dead. Marcus had stood there, phone in hand, breath curling in the cold air, and felt something crack inside him that he'd been holding together for years. He thought about calling his brother James down in Atlanta. But James had his own problems. 2 kids, a mortgage, a wife who just lost her job. Marcus wasn't the kind of man who leaned on people. He carried. That's what he did. He carried. He thought about Zoe. She needed surgery. Nothing life-threatening. The doctors called it a corrective procedure for a congenital issue with her left ear that affected her hearing. Insurance covered part of it, but the out-of-pocket was $11,000, and Marcus had exactly $2,300 in savings. He'd been picking up extra hauls for months, trying to close the gap. Now he had 7 days of work left, and no plan after that. He pulled onto the interstate just after 4 p.m., knowing the storm was coming, but hoping he'd outrun it. He didn't. Nobody outran this one. By 8 o'clock, the highway was a ghost road. No headlights ahead, no taillights behind. Just white noise and white ground, and a man alone with his thoughts. His CB radio crackled. Any drivers on Route 7, this is Colorado DOT. Mountain Pass is closing in 1 hour. Repeat, pass closing in 60 minutes. If you're past mile marker 114, proceed to the rest area at 126. If you're not, pull off and shelter. Marcus checked his position. Mile marker 109. He had 5 miles to decide. Push forward or stop. If he stopped, he'd lose a full day, and he only had 7 left. He pushed forward. The rig groaned against the grade. The road tilted upward, and the snow thickened until it felt like driving through wet concrete. Marcus leaned forward in his seat, eyes locked on the narrow cone of light ahead. That's when he saw it. A flash of red, faint, blinking, almost swallowed by the storm. Hazard lights. He eased off the gas and let the rig crawl closer. A sedan, dark blue, maybe black, sat crooked on the shoulder, half buried in a snowdrift. The driver's side door was cracked open an inch, like someone had tried to get out and couldn't. Marcus pulled the air brakes. The rig hissed and shuddered to a stop. He sat there for 3 seconds. 3 seconds where every logical thought in his head told him the same thing. You're on a deadline. You've got 7 days. You can't afford this. Then he grabbed his jacket, shoved the door open, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit him like a wall. Wind cut through his coat instantly. Snow packed into his collar and stung his face. He couldn't see 20 feet ahead. He reached the car in what felt like a lifetime, but was probably 30 seconds. He pulled the driver's door open against the wind. A woman sat inside. She wasn't moving much. Her coat was soaked. Her hands were in her lap, fingers white. Her lips had a blue tinge that told Marcus she'd been here too long already. "Ma'am!" He had to shout over the wind. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened. They were sharp, even through the cold, even through the fear. There was something alert and focused in them. "The car died," she whispered. "An hour ago. Maybe more. I couldn't get a signal." "You're coming with me," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. She looked at him. A black man, 6'2", heavy jacket, trucker cap pulled low. Standing in a blizzard on an empty mountain road in the middle of the night. He could see the hesitation cross her face. He'd seen that look before. He'd been seeing it his whole life. "Ma'am," he said, quieter now, leaning in so she could hear him without the wind stealing his words. "I've got a warm truck, hot coffee, and a heater that works. You stay here, you won't make it till morning. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just trying to help." Something in his voice broke through. She nodded. He helped her out of the car. She was lighter than he expected. Her legs buckled when she stood, and he caught her, one arm around her shoulders, guiding her through the snow toward the rig. Getting her up into the cab was a fight. She didn't have the strength to pull herself up, so Marcus half lifted her onto the step and steadied her until she could climb inside. He followed, pulling the door shut against the howling wind. The cab felt like another world, warm, quiet. The engine hummed low, and the heater pushed hot air through the vents. Marcus grabbed his spare blanket from behind the seat, an old wool thing Zoe had picked out at a thrift store because it had stars on it, and wrapped it around the woman's shoulders. "Here." He handed her his thermos. "It's black coffee. Not great, but it's hot." She took it with trembling hands and drank. Color started returning to her face almost immediately. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was steadier now. I thought no one was coming." "Almost didn't see you," Marcus admitted. "Storm's got the road invisible. Another 20 minutes and the snow would have buried your car completely." She looked at him, really looked at him, as if memorizing his face. "What's your name?" "Marcus Cole." "Marcus." She repeated it like she was filing it away. "I'm Elena." "Elena. Good to meet you. Wish it was somewhere warmer." She almost laughed. Almost. Then a shiver ran through her, and she pulled the blanket tighter. "You got anyone we should call?" Marcus asked. "Husband? Family?" "No husband. My phone died with the car. I was driving alone." "In this storm? On this road?" "I know. It was stupid." Marcus didn't argue. He'd learned a long time ago that people don't need you to tell them what they already know. They just need you to not make it worse. The radio crackled again. "Route 7 Mountain Pass is now closed. Repeat. Pass is closed. Do not attempt to cross. Emergency services are suspended until morning." Marcus leaned back in his seat. "Well, looks like we're here for the night." Elena looked out the windshield at the wall of white. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you in this position." "You didn't put me anywhere. Storm did that. I just happened to be the one driving through it." She studied him again, that same sharp look, like she was reading something beneath his surface. "Do you always stop for strangers?" Marcus thought about it. "My mother used to say something. She said, 'Marcus, the world is cold enough. Don't you add to it.' She passed when I was 19, but I hear her every time I see someone stuck on the side of the road." Elena went quiet for a moment. "She sounds like she was a good woman." "Best I ever knew." They sat in silence for a while. The storm screamed outside, but inside the cab there was something that almost felt like peace. Then Elena said, "You have a daughter." Marcus looked at her, surprised. She pointed at his phone on the dash. Zoe's picture was the lock screen, gap-toothed grin, braids with pink beads, holding a crayon drawing of a big red truck. "Yeah," Marcus said, and his voice softened the way it only did when he talked about Zoe. "That's my girl, Zoe. She's 7. She's beautiful." "She's everything." "Is her mother—" "Gone. Left when Zoe was 2. Said she wasn't built for this life. I guess she meant me." He said it without bitterness, which surprised even him. There was a time when those words would have burned coming out. But somewhere between the sleepless nights and the school drop-offs and the bedtime stories read from the driver's seat over a phone, he'd let it go. Not forgiven, just released. "You raise her alone?" Elena asked. "Mostly. My neighbor Denise helps when I'm on the road. Zoe's tough, though. Tougher than me." "I doubt that." Marcus smiled. "You'd be surprised." Elena took another sip of coffee and then said something that caught him off guard. "What does your company do for drivers with families?" He looked at her sideways. "What do you mean?" "Benefits, childcare support, schedule flexibility for single parents." Marcus laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. "Lady, my company doesn't even fix the brakes on half these rigs. You think they're thinking about childcare?" "That bad?" "Worse. I've been driving for North Hall for 12 years. Know what I got for my 10th anniversary? A keychain. Not even a good one. The clasp broke the same week." Elena didn't smile. Her jaw tightened, and something shifted in her eyes. Something that looked a lot like anger, but not at him. "And now they're letting you go?" she asked. Marcus turned to her sharply. "How'd you know that?" He hadn't told her. He was sure of it. Elena caught herself. I You mentioned you were pushing through the storm to make a deadline.
And you have that look.
What look? The look of a man who's carrying more than cargo. Marcus held her gaze for a long time. Something about this woman didn't add up. The way she asked questions, the way she listened, not like someone making conversation, but like someone gathering intelligence. Who are you, Elena? I told you, I'm a woman driving alone on a mountain road in a blizzard with no phone, no plan, and no one expecting her. That doesn't make sense. She looked down at her hands. You're right. It doesn't. So? She took a breath. I was researching something, trying to understand something about my family's business. I wanted to see it from the ground level, the real level, not boardroom reports and quarterly projections. I wanted to see what the people who actually do the work go through. Marcus frowned. And you thought almost dying in a snowstorm was the way to do that? It wasn't supposed to storm tonight.
The forecast said clear skies until midnight.
Forecasts lie. Apparently. He shook his head. Rich folks, always trying to understand what it's like to be us. You want to know what it's like? It's this. It's driving through a storm you know might kill you because you can't afford to stop. It's praying your daughter doesn't wake up scared while you're 800 miles away. It's getting a termination letter after 12 years and being told it's not personal. His voice cracked on the last word. He hadn't meant to say all that. Elena's eyes were wet. She didn't wipe them. I'm sorry, Marcus. Don't be. It's not your fault. She didn't respond to that. She just looked away, out at the storm. And something heavy settled on her face. Guilt, maybe. Or recognition. The hours crawled. Marcus told her about Zoe's surgery. He hadn't planned to. It just came out, the way things do at 3 a.m. When the world is buried in snow, and you're sitting with a stranger who listens like they actually care. The doctors say it's routine, he said. But routine still costs 11 grand out of pocket. Insurance won't cover the full procedure. I've been saving for months, picking up every extra haul I can, and now... He stopped. Now they're taking your job, Elena finished. Yeah. How much do you have saved? 2,300. Not enough. Not even close. Elena's hands gripped the thermos tightly. And if you don't get the surgery? Her hearing gets worse, slowly, over time. She's already struggling in school. Teacher says she sits in the front row and still misses half of what's said. She doesn't complain, though. That kid never complains. Like her father. Marcus looked at her. I complain plenty, just not where she can hear it. Elena set the thermos down. Her voice changed, lower, steadier. The way someone speaks when they've made a decision. Marcus, I want you to know something. What you did tonight, stopping for me. Most people wouldn't have done that. Sure they would. No, they wouldn't. I've been on this road for 3 days. I've seen trucks blow past broken down cars without slowing down. I've seen drivers look the other way. You didn't. In the storm that could have killed you, you stopped. It's just what you do. It's what you do. There's a difference. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed. No signal for calls, but a delayed text pushed through from Denise. Zoe woke up crying. She said she had a dream you were in a snowstorm. I told her you were fine. She said, my daddy always comes home. She's back asleep now. Marcus stared at the screen. His jaw clenched, his eyes burned. He turned his face toward the window so Elena wouldn't see. But she saw. She's lucky to have you, Elena said quietly. Nah. His voice was rough. I'm the lucky one. The storm began to break just before 5 a.m. The wind dropped first, then the snow thinned, and a faint gray light crept across the horizon. Marcus stepped out to check the road. Fresh plow tracks cut through the drifts. The highway was opening. He climbed back in and found Elena awake, folding the star blanket neatly. "Looks like we can move," he said. "Where's the nearest town?" "Cedar Falls, about 40 minutes down the mountain. There's a diner, a motel, a gas station. I can drop you there." "The diner," she said. "Drop me at the diner." He didn't ask why. By now he'd learned that Elena gave you exactly as much as she wanted, and not a word more. They rode in silence for most of the drive. The sun broke through the clouds, and the world turned blinding white. Marcus squinted against the glare, guiding the rig down the winding road with the ease of a man who'd driven it 1,000 times. When they reached Cedar Falls, he pulled up in front of a small diner with a hand-painted sign that read, "Betty's." Steam rose from the vents on the roof. A few pickup trucks sat in the lot. Elena gathered herself and reached for the door handle. Then she stopped. "Marcus?" "Yeah?" She turned to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, yes, but something else underneath. Something that almost looked like a promise. "Thank you. For everything. For the coffee, for the blanket, for not driving past. Just doing what's right. You did more than that, and I think you know it." She paused. "Take care of that little girl." "Always." She opened the door, stepped down into the slushy street, and walked toward the diner. Just before she went inside, she turned back. "You take care, Marcus Cole." She said his full name, clear, deliberate. And Marcus sat there behind the wheel, engine idling, realizing he had never told her his last name. He watched her disappear through the diner door. The bell above it jingled faintly. Something wasn't right. Something about this woman. The questions, the composure, the way she said his name like she already knew it. None of it fit. But the road was calling, and Marcus Cole was a man who answered. He put the rig in gear, pulled back onto the highway, and drove toward a future he couldn't see coming. 2 days passed and Marcus couldn't shake her. He tried. He drove 400 miles to Denver with a load of steel brackets, dropped them at the warehouse on time, signed the paperwork, and told himself it was just another night on the road. People help people. That's how it works. You stop, you do what's right, you move on. But Elena wasn't moving on. She sat in the back of his mind like a passenger who refused to get out. The way she'd said his full name, the questions she'd asked, not about him, but about the company. The way her eyes had changed when he told her about the termination letter, like she was angry at someone who wasn't in the truck. Marcus pulled into a truck stop outside Fort Collins and parked between 2 other rigs. The lot was half empty. A fluorescent sign buzzed above the fuel pumps. He killed the engine and sat in the silence for a long time. His phone rang. "Daddy!" Zoe's voice hit him like sunlight. He closed his eyes and let it wash through him. "Hey, baby girl, you being good for Miss Denise?" "I made pancakes. Well, Miss Denise made pancakes. I put the blueberries on top." "That's the most important part." "Daddy, when are you coming home?" The question landed in his chest like a stone. He rubbed his face with his free hand. 2 more days, baby. Maybe 3. Then I'm home for a while." "A long while?" He swallowed. "We'll see." "Promise you'll be here for my school thing? It's on Friday. I'm reading my poem in front of everybody." "I'll be there. I promise." "Okay. I love you, Daddy." "Love you more, Zoe." He hung up and sat there staring at the phone. Friday. That was 5 days away. His last day with North Hall was in 6. After that, nothing. No income, no insurance, no way to pay for the surgery. He thought about applying to other companies. He'd already looked. Most of the big outfits wanted younger drivers, guys who'd work for less and complain even less. Marcus was 44. In trucking years, that made him a dinosaur with a bad back and too many opinions. He thought about Uber, warehouse work, anything. Then he thought about Zoe sitting in the front row of her classroom, leaning forward, straining to hear a teacher whose voice was fading a little more every month. He got out of the truck and walked into the truck stop diner. The place smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner. A few drivers sat scattered at the counter, faces lit by phone screens. Nobody talked. Nobody ever talked. Marcus ordered coffee and a sandwich he didn't want. He sat in a booth by the window and pulled out the termination letter. He'd read it so many times the creases were starting to tear. Dear Mr. Cole, due to ongoing restructuring efforts at North Hall Logistics, your current position has been identified as redundant. Your final active day will be redundant. That word burned every time. His phone buzzed. A text from Rick Lawson. Cole, change of plans. Before your last day, you need to report to HQ in Denver. Monday, 9 a.m. Company review. All drivers in the Western Corridor are required to attend. Don't be late. Marcus stared at the message. In 12 years, he'd never been called to headquarters. He didn't even know where it was exactly. Some glass building downtown that had nothing to do with the road. He typed back, "What's this about?" Rick's reply came fast. New ownership is doing a full review. Just show up, answer whatever they ask, and don't make waves. You're still on payroll for 6 more days. Act like it. New ownership. That was news. Marcus hadn't heard anything about North Hall being sold. But then again, drivers never heard anything. Information flowed one direction at that company, from the top down, and usually in the form of bad news. He pocketed his phone and ate his sandwich in silence. Monday came cold and bright. Marcus drove into Denver early, navigating downtown streets that felt foreign after years of highways and back roads. The corporate building was exactly what he'd expected. Glass, chrome, a lobby that smelled like money and leather. Everything polished, everything clean. The kind of place designed to make men like him feel small. He parked his rig on a side street, drawing looks from a couple in a BMW waiting at a red light. He was used to that, too. A big black man climbing out of a truck in a neighborhood where people wore suits that cost more than his monthly pay. He walked in wearing his cleanest jeans, a button-down shirt he'd ironed at the truck stop that morning, and his work boots. He thought about buying new shoes, but decided against it. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He was here because they told him to come. The lobby was busy. Men and women in business attire moved through the space with purpose, carrying tablets and coffee cups, speaking in low, efficient tones. Marcus stood near the entrance and felt every inch of the gap between their world and his. He approached the front desk. A young woman with a headset smiled at him, the kind of smile that was part of the job. "Can I help you?" "Yeah, I'm here for the driver review. Name's Marcus Cole." She typed something, paused, and then looked up with a slightly different expression. "Mr. Cole, yes, you're expected. Top floor, conference room B." "Top floor?" "That's correct." "Ma'am, I think there might be a mistake. I'm a driver. Well, I was a driver. I don't think the top floor is where I should be." "No mistake, Mr. Cole. You're on the list. Elevators are to your right." Marcus thanked her and walked toward the elevators, his boots making a sound on the marble floor that seemed louder than it should have been. He passed a group of executives who didn't even glance at him. He was invisible here, same as always. The elevator was empty. He pressed the button for the top floor and watched the numbers climb. His reflection stared back at him from the polished doors. A tired man with graying temples and calloused hands, wearing a shirt that didn't quite hide the fact that he'd been sleeping in a truck cab for most of the past decade. The doors opened. The top floor was different from the lobby. Quieter, carpeted. The air smelled like fresh flowers and expensive wood. A long hallway led to a set of double doors with a brass plate that read, Conference Room B. Marcus walked toward it, his heart beating harder than it had any right to. He'd faced blizzards, jackknife trailers, black ice at 70 miles an hour. None of that made him nervous the way this hallway did. He pushed the door open. The room was large. A long table dominated the center, surrounded by leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the Denver skyline, snow-capped mountains in the distance. 6 or 7 people stood in clusters, talking quietly. Board members, executives. Marcus could tell by the way they carried themselves. These were people who made decisions about other people's lives. And standing near the window, speaking to a man in a charcoal suit, was Elena. Marcus stopped in the doorway. She looked nothing like the woman from the blizzard. Her hair was pulled back, neat and professional. She wore a gray suit that fit like it was made for her. Her posture was straight, commanding. The people around her deferred to her with a subtle gravity that told Marcus everything he needed to know before a single word was spoken. She turned. Their eyes met. The room didn't stop. The other people kept talking. But for Marcus, everything went silent. His mind tried to process what he was seeing, tried to reconcile the shivering woman wrapped in his daughter's star blanket with this person who clearly owned every square inch of this building. Elena walked toward him. Her heels clicked on the floor. Her expression was warm, but there was something else in it. Something careful. "Mr. Cole," she said, "it's good to see you again." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Elena? Please, sit down." Why are you here?" "I work here, Marcus. I own this company." The words landed on him like a physical weight. He took a step back without meaning to. "You, North Hall? You own North Hall?" "My father founded it 40 years ago. When he passed last year, I inherited full ownership. I've been reviewing operations for the past few months." Marcus felt the room tilt. He reached for the back of a chair to steady himself. "You were in my truck," he said slowly, "in a blizzard, on a mountain, and you own—" He stopped. His jaw tightened. "Was that planned? Was I some kind of test?" "No," Elena's voice was firm. "The blizzard was not planned. I was driving the corridor to see conditions for myself. The car broke down. The storm hit. You stopped. None of that was staged." "But you knew who I was." She paused. "Not at first. When you told me your name, I recognized it from the personnel files I'd been reviewing. Marcus Cole, 12 years, perfect record, flagged for termination." The last word hung in the air between them. "You knew I was being fired," Marcus said. "You sat in my truck, drank my coffee, let me tell you about my daughter, and you knew the whole time that your company was throwing me away." "I didn't know about the termination until you told me. I learned the details after, when I got back and pulled your file." "And what? You felt guilty?" "I felt furious." That stopped him. He searched her face for deception and found none. Elena gestured toward the table. "Sit down, Marcus. Please. Let me explain." He didn't sit. Not yet. "Tell me one thing first. If I hadn't stopped that night, if I'd driven past you like every other trucker on that road, would I still be standing here?" Elena held his gaze. "Honestly? Probably not. You'd be finishing your last week and turning in your keys, and I wouldn't have known your name was anything more than a line item on a spreadsheet." So this is because I helped you. This is because helping me showed me who you are. And who you are is exactly what this company needs. Marcus finally sat down. His legs felt uncertain beneath him. The other executives had stopped talking now. They watched from the edges of the room, unsure of what they were witnessing. Elena took the chair across from him. She opened a folder and slid it toward him. I've spent the last 2 months reviewing this company from the inside out. What I found was ugly. Drivers working 16-hour shifts with no overtime. Rigs that haven't passed inspection in years. A management structure that treats the people who keep this company running like, what was the word in your termination letter? Redundant, Marcus said quietly. Redundant. That word is going to haunt the men who used it. She leaned forward. I've already dismissed Rick Lawson. Marcus looked up. Rick's gone? As of this morning, along with 3 regional managers who approved terminations based on cost-cutting algorithms without ever reviewing individual performance records. Your name was on a list generated by a computer, Marcus. No human being looked at your 12 years of service and decided you should go. A program did. And the people who were supposed to catch that failure didn't care enough to check. Marcus didn't know what to say. For 12 years, he'd felt like a ghost inside this company. He showed up, did his job, went home. Nobody praised him. Nobody noticed. And now the woman who owned the whole operation was sitting across from him, telling him the system that erased him was broken. I'm restructuring everything, Elena continued. New management, new policies, better pay, better equipment, better treatment for every single driver. But I can't do it from this boardroom. I need someone who understands the road, someone the drivers trust, someone who's been where they've been. She tapped the folder. Open it. Marcus looked down. His hands were trembling slightly, and he hated that. He opened the folder. Inside was an official offer letter. The title read, Regional Operations Supervisor, Western Division. The salary was more than double what he'd been making. Full benefits, health coverage for dependents, a signing bonus. His eyes stopped on one line. Comprehensive family medical coverage, effective immediately. Zoe's surgery. His vision blurred. He blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall in a room full of strangers in suits. Why me? His voice was rough. You've got 100 drivers out there, some with degrees, some with experience in management. Why pick the guy who handed you a thermos of bad coffee in a snowstorm? Elena smiled for the first time since he'd walked in. It was the same smile from the truck, tired but real. Because at 3 a.m, in the worst storm of the year, with your own life falling apart, you stopped for a stranger. You didn't know who I was. You didn't expect anything in return. You gave me your blanket, your daughter's blanket, and you sat up all night to make sure I was safe. She paused. That's not a skill you learn in management training. That's character. And character is what this company lost. Marcus stared at the letter. The words swam in front of him. He thought about every mile he'd driven, every cold night, every time he'd called Zoe from a rest stop parking lot and told her Daddy would be home soon, when he wasn't sure that was true. Every time someone had looked through him like he wasn't there. I didn't do it for this, he said. I know, Elena replied. That's the whole point. A silence settled between them. The executives shifted uncomfortably near the windows. One of them, a tall man with silver hair, cleared his throat. Ms. Hargrove, with all due respect, this is highly irregular. We have candidates with management experience, MBAs, people who've been through the leadership pipeline. And not one of them stopped their truck in a blizzard to save a stranger, Elena said without turning around. Her voice was polite, but carried an edge that closed the man's mouth instantly. This company was built by a man who started with one truck and a handshake. My father didn't have an MBA. He had integrity. And I'm not going to rebuild what he created by hiring people who look good on paper but wouldn't cross a parking lot to help someone in need. The room went quiet. Marcus looked at her. Your father. What was his name? William Hargrove. Big Bill Hargrove? The guy in the photo in the break room at the Denver terminal. That's him. Marcus shook his head slowly. I used to look at that photo every time I clocked in. Big guy, standing next to his first truck. Always thought he looked like a man who'd been through it. He had. He drove rigs for 15 years before he built the company. He knew what it meant to be on the road alone. And he would have hated what this company became after he got sick. Marcus leaned back in his chair and looked out the window. Denver spread out below, cars crawling through slushy streets, people moving through their lives unaware that in this room, on this floor, a man who'd spent 20 years being invisible was being asked to step into the light. I need to think about it, he said. Elena nodded. Take whatever time you need. He stood up, folder in hand. His legs felt steadier now. He looked at Elena one more time. The blanket, the one with the stars. Zoe's going to ask about it. Elena opened a drawer behind her desk and pulled it out. Washed, folded neatly, the faded stars still visible on the dark blue wool. I had it cleaned, she said. Tell Zoe thank you. It kept me alive. Marcus took it. He held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it, the way something so small could carry so much. He walked out of the conference room, past the executives who watched him go, past the receptionist who smiled at him differently now, through the lobby with its glass and chrome, and out into the cold Denver air. He sat in his truck for 20 minutes without starting the engine. Then he called Denise. Hey, it's Marcus. Is Zoe up? She's right here. Hold on. A rustle, then that voice, the one that made everything else in the world shrink to nothing. Daddy! Hey, baby girl. Listen, Daddy might have some good news soon. What kind of good news? The kind where I'm home more. A lot more. Really? Really. And you'll be at my school thing on Friday? I'll be in the front row. Zoe squealed so loud, Marcus had to pull the phone away from his ear. He laughed, a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and almost forgotten. He hung up and looked at the offer letter one more time. Then he looked at the star blanket on the passenger seat. His mother's voice echoed in his head, the way it always did when the road got hard. The world is cold enough, Marcus. Don't you add to it. He hadn't added to it. He'd done the opposite. And for the first time in 12 years, someone had noticed. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed the number on the letterhead. Elena answered on the second ring. It's Marcus Cole, he said. I'll take it. The call lasted 11 seconds. Elena said, I'm glad, Marcus. See you Monday. And that was it. No celebration, no fanfare. Just a quiet shift in the direction of a man's life, like a truck changing lanes on an empty highway. Marcus spent the rest of that week finishing his last hauls. He drove the same roads he'd driven for 12 years, but they felt different now. Lighter, maybe. Or maybe he was the one who felt lighter. He wasn't sure. What he was sure of was that every time he looked at the offer letter folded in his jacket pocket, something in his chest tightened. Not with joy, but with fear. He'd been invisible his whole career. Invisible was safe. Invisible meant nobody expected anything from you, and nobody was disappointed when you didn't deliver. What Elena was offering him was the opposite of invisible. She was putting him in a room full of people who'd spent their entire lives looking down at men like him, and she was asking him to lead. Friday came before the fear could talk him out of it. He made it to Zoe's school 20 minutes early. He sat in the front row of the auditorium on a folding chair that was too small for him, his knees pressed against the seat in front. Parents filed in around him. A few glanced his way. The big black man in work boots sitting alone. He was used to it. Then Zoe walked onto the stage. She was wearing a yellow dress that Denise had ironed that morning. Her braids had fresh pink beads, and she carried a piece of paper in both hands like it was the most important thing in the world. She scanned the audience, squinting slightly, the left ear, the one that was losing ground. And then she found him. Her whole face changed. She smiled so wide, Marcus thought her cheeks might break. She read her poem. It was about a truck that drove through the night to bring presents to kids who didn't have any. The truck driver was a hero, she said. He was brave and strong, and he always came home. Marcus didn't cry. Not there. He saved it for the parking lot, sitting in his truck with the engine off, both hands on the wheel, his shoulders shaking with something that had been locked inside him for years. Monday morning, he walked into North Hall headquarters, wearing the same button-down shirt, the same boots, but carrying something he hadn't brought last time. The folder with his signed offer letter. The receptionist greeted him differently. "Good morning, Mr. Cole. Miss Hargrove asked me to direct you to the 3rd floor. Your office is ready." His office? Marcus almost laughed. The last private space he'd had was the cab of his truck. The 3rd floor was operations. Open cubicles, ringing phones, people moving with the organized chaos of a logistics company. Marcus followed the signs to a corner office with a window that looked out over the loading docks. A desk, a computer, a chair that didn't vibrate when you sat in it. On the desk was a nameplate, freshly printed. Marcus Cole, Regional Operations Supervisor. He set the folder down and stood there for a long time, staring at his own name. A knock on the open door broke the silence. A heavy-set man with a clipboard leaned in. "You Cole?" "That's me." "Tom Briggs. I run dispatch for the Western Division. Heard you're the new boss." He said the word boss the way you'd say tourist, with thinly veiled contempt. "I wouldn't say boss. I'm here to help coordinate. Look, I've been running dispatch for 9 years. I don't need coordinating. What I need is for the new management to stop shuffling chairs on the deck and let us do our jobs." Marcus held his gaze. "Fair enough. I'm not here to shuffle anything. I'm here because I spent 12 years on the road, and I know what works and what doesn't. 12 years driving doesn't make you qualified to manage a regional operation. Maybe not, but 12 years driving does make me qualified to tell you when your drivers are running on 4 hours of sleep and bald tires. And from what I've seen in the files, that's been happening a lot." Tom's jaw tightened. He tapped his clipboard against his thigh. "We'll see how long you last." He walked away without another word. Marcus sat down in his new chair and exhaled. Day 1, and he'd already made an enemy. The first week was a gauntlet. Every meeting felt like a test he hadn't studied for. The executives spoke in a language he didn't know. KP is throughput optimization, margin analysis. Marcus sat in conference rooms surrounded by people with degrees on their walls and watched them talk about drivers like they were parts in a machine. Replaceable, interchangeable, redundant. That word again. He kept his mouth shut for the first 3 meetings. He listened. He watched. He learned who was genuine and who was performing. Most of them were performing. On Wednesday, he sat in a meeting led by the silver-haired man from the boardroom, the one who'd questioned Elena's decision. His name was Gerald Ashworth, Chief Operating Officer, 22 years with the company. He'd been William Hargrove's right hand, and he clearly believed the company should have passed to him, not to the founder's daughter, who'd been absent for years. The restructuring plan calls for a 15% reduction in fleet operating costs, Ashworth said, clicking through a slide presentation. We'll achieve this through route consolidation, driver reduction, and deferred maintenance on lower priority units. Marcus frowned. Deferred maintenance? Every head in the room turned. Ashworth looked at him over the rim of his glasses. Yes, Mr. Cole, deferred maintenance. Postponing non-critical repairs to reallocate budget toward higher-yield routes. Which trucks are we talking about? Units in the Western Corridor primarily. Older rigs that are nearing end-of-life cycle anyway. Those are the trucks I drove, Marcus said. I know those rigs. Unit 227 has a brake caliper that's been grinding for 8 months. Unit 314 pulls hard to the right above 50 miles an hour. Unit 189 has a heater that cuts out below 20 degrees. And we're sending that truck through mountain passes in January. The room was silent. Those aren't non-critical repairs, Marcus continued. Those are safety issues. And deferred maintenance is just a fancy way of saying we're gambling with people's lives to save money. Ashworth's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped a degree. Mr. Cole, I appreciate your perspective from the road, but operational budgeting requires a broader view than what? Than the view from the driver's seat? Because that's the only view that matters when a truck blows a tire at 70 on black ice. This is a financial discussion. No, sir. This is a safety discussion disguised as a financial one. And I've buried 2 friends in this industry. One was driving a rig with a known transmission issue that his company kept deferring. He was 29, had a baby on the way. The room stayed quiet. Ashworth stared at Marcus with an expression that wasn't quite anger. It was closer to recognition. The recognition that this man wasn't going to fold. We can revisit the maintenance schedule, Ashworth said stiffly. Moving on. After the meeting, Marcus walked back to his office and found Elena waiting inside, leaning against the window frame. You made Gerald uncomfortable, she said. Good. He's been running this company's operations for over 2 decades. He's not going to change overnight. I'm not asking him to change overnight. I'm asking him to fix a brake caliper before somebody dies. Elena studied him. You know he's going to fight you on everything. I figured that out in the first 5 minutes. He thinks you're here because I owe you a favor. That's what he's telling the board behind closed doors. He calls you his words, charity project. Marcus felt the heat rise in his neck. Charity project. His words, not mine. And what do you tell the board? I tell them to look at the numbers. Driver retention in your corridor was the worst in the company. Turnover cost us $2 million last year. You know why drivers quit? Because nobody listens to them. Nobody respects them. They're line items on a spreadsheet, just like you were. She pushed off the window and faced him directly. You're not here because you saved me in a blizzard, Marcus. You're here because when I sat in your truck and asked you what was wrong with this company, you told me the truth. Every single thing you said matched what I found in the data. You diagnosed the problem from the inside, while these executives have been staring at dashboards and missing it for years. They don't see it that way. They don't have to. Not yet. Results will speak for you. Just give it time. Time. Marcus shook his head. That's what people always say when they mean, be patient while everybody takes shots at you. Elena didn't argue. She just looked at him with that same steady gaze she'd had in the truck, the one that said she saw more than he was showing. She left without another word. The next 2 weeks tested Marcus in ways the road never had. The road was hard, but it was honest. It froze you, shook you, tried to kill you, but it never pretended to be your friend while plodding behind your back. Corporate was different. Corporate smiled to your face and whispered in the halls. He heard the whispers. A driver promoted to supervisor? A guy who never finished college, sitting in a corner office? Some of it was professional skepticism. Some of it was something else. The kind of thing Marcus had felt his entire life, but could never quite prove. One afternoon, he overheard two managers talking in the break room. They didn't know he was around the corner. Hargrove's just trying to make a statement. Diversity hire. Puts a black face in the window. Looks good on the website. Guy was literally a truck driver 2 weeks ago. Now he's telling us how to run operations? Come on. Give it 3 months. He'll be gone. Marcus stood there, coffee cup in hand, and let the words settle into the place where all the other words like that lived. The place that had been filling up since he was 12 years old. Walking home from school in a neighborhood where people crossed the street when they saw him coming. He didn't confront them. He went back to his office, closed the door, and sat down. For a long time, he didn't move. Then he opened his laptop and pulled up the driver roster for the Western Corridor. 214 names. Men and women who spent their lives on the road, away from their families, grinding through storms and deadlines for a company that forgot they existed. He knew most of them by reputation. Some he'd driven alongside for years. He picked up the phone and started calling. The first driver he reached was a man named Carl Jeffries, 61, 30 years with North Hall. Carl picked up on the fifth ring, with a voice like gravel and suspicion. "Who is this?" "Carl, it's Marcus Cole. I used to run the I-70 corridor." "Cole? Heard you got some desk job at HQ. Moving up in the world." "Something like that. Listen, I'm calling because I want to know what you need." Silence. "Carl? You serious?" "Dead serious. What do you need to do your job better? What's broken? What are you tired of complaining about that nobody fixes?" Another long pause. Then Carl laughed, a rough, disbelieving sound. "Boy, how much time you got? Because that list is longer than my ex-wife's grudge." Marcus smiled. "I've got all day." He called 14 drivers that afternoon. Every single one reacted the same way. Shock that someone from corporate was calling to ask what they needed instead of telling them what to do. By the end of the day, Marcus had filled an entire notebook with problems. Bad routes, broken equipment, unrealistic schedules, rest stops that hadn't been cleaned in months, a dispatcher who regularly shorted drivers on miles to pad his own numbers. He compiled everything into a report and sent it to Elena that night. She called him at 10 p.m. "I read it," she said. "All of it." And I'm angry. This is worse than I thought. The dispatcher, Jensen, has been falsifying mileage records for 3 years? According to at least 7 drivers I talked to, yes. They've complained before. Nothing happened. Something's happening now. I want Jensen investigated by end of week, and I want every issue in this report assigned to someone with a deadline. Some of these fixes cost money. Ashworth's going to push back. Let me handle Ashworth. Marcus paused. Elena? Yes? The guys I called today. Some of them started crying on the phone. Grown men. 60-year-old guys who've been hauling freight since before I was born. They cried because someone asked them what they needed. You understand what that means? Elena was quiet for a moment. It means we've been failing them for a long time. It means they've been waiting for someone to see them, the same way I was. He hung up and sat in his kitchen, the small apartment he rented near Zoe's school. 3 rooms that felt like a palace after years of truck cabs. Zoe was asleep in her room, the one Marcus had painted lavender because she said it was the color of dreams. He walked to her door and pushed it open. She was curled on her side, the star blanket pulled up to her chin. The nightlight cast a soft glow across her face. Marcus leaned against the doorframe and watched her breathe. She had a consultation with the surgeon next week. The new insurance from North Hall covered the procedure completely. He'd gotten the confirmation letter that morning, but hadn't told her yet. He wanted to wait until it was real, scheduled, dated, certain. He'd made too many promises he couldn't keep. His phone buzzed. A text from Carl Jeffries. "Talk to some of the boys. Word's getting around that you're actually listening. Don't let us down, Cole." Marcus typed back, "I won't." He meant it the way he meant everything, with the quiet weight of a man who understood that promises weren't words. They were what you did when nobody was watching. The third week brought the fight Marcus had been expecting. He arrived at the office Monday morning to find an email from Ashworth's assistant, requesting his presence at an operational review at 2 p.m. The phrasing was polite. The intent wasn't. Marcus walked into the conference room at exactly 2 o'clock. Ashworth was there with 3 other senior managers. No Elena. "Sit down, Mr. Cole," Ashworth said. Marcus sat. "I'll get to the point. Your report on driver conditions has created significant disruption. You've gone around established channels, contacted drivers directly without authorization from their regional managers, and submitted a document that, frankly, reads more like a union grievance than a professional assessment. It reads like the truth. It reads like a man who's been in his position for 3 weeks, overstepping his authority. My authority is driver operations. That's what the title says. I operated. I talked to the drivers. They told me what's wrong. I wrote it down. You accused a dispatcher of fraud. 7 drivers confirmed it independently. Those are allegations, Mr. Cole, not evidence. And publishing allegations without proper investigation exposes this company to legal liability. Did you consider that?" Marcus looked at Ashworth steadily. "Did you consider that a dispatcher stealing miles from drivers is the reason 4 of them quit last quarter? That's $60,000 in recruiting and training costs. You want to talk about liability? Talk about the cost of ignoring your own people." Ashworth's face went red. "You're out of your depth." "Maybe, but I'm not wrong." One of the other managers, a woman named Sandra Voss, shifted in her seat. "Gerald, he does have a point about turnover costs. The Western Corridor numbers are—" "I'm aware of the numbers, Sandra." "Then you're aware that they've been declining for 3 consecutive years under current management. If the driver feedback in Mr. Cole's report is accurate, we at least owe it due diligence." Ashworth looked at Sandra like she'd broken ranks in a war. She held his gaze without flinching. Marcus said nothing. He'd learned enough about corporate politics in 3 weeks to know that sometimes the best thing a man could do was shut up and let the cracks widen on their own. Ashworth gathered his papers. "I'm escalating this to the board. Ms. Hargrove may have hired you, Mr. Cole, but the board has final say on operational authority. I'd suggest you spend less time calling drivers and more time learning how this company actually works." He walked out. The other managers followed. Sandra paused at the door. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "that report was the most honest thing I've read in this building in 5 years." "Thanks. Don't thank me. Just don't let them bury it." She left. Marcus sat alone in the conference room. His hands were steady, but his heart was pounding. He'd gone against the second most powerful person in the company, and there was no taking that back. His phone rang. Elena. "I heard about the meeting," she said. "News travels fast up here." "Ashworth is taking it to the board. He wants your authority limited to administrative oversight only. No direct contact with drivers. No independent reports." "That guts the whole job." "I know." "So what do we do?" "The board meets Thursday. I need you there. And I need you to bring something Ashworth can't argue with. Like what? Proof. Hard proof. Not driver testimonials. He'll dismiss those as anecdotal. I need data. Maintenance records, mileage logs, turnover statistics. Show the board that what you found isn't just complaints. It's a pattern. A pattern that's costing this company millions. Marcus rubbed his forehead. I'm a trucker, Elena. I don't know how to put together a board presentation. You know the truth. That's the hard part. The rest is just putting it on paper. I'll send Sandra Voss to help. She's on our side, even if she can't say it out loud yet. Why is she helping? Because her brother is a driver. He works for a competitor. She knows what these men go through. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Thursday. And Marcus? Yeah? Don't wear the boots. He almost laughed. Almost. The boots are non-negotiable. He worked through Tuesday and Wednesday like a man possessed. Sandra Voss came to his office both evenings, helping him organize data into charts and slides that told the story the numbers already knew. Maintenance deferrals had increased by 40% over 3 years. Driver injury claims had doubled. Turnover in the Western Corridor was 3 times the industry average. And Jensen, the dispatcher, had shorted drivers on over 16,000 miles in the past year alone. Mileage that translated to stolen wages. This is damning, Sandra said, scrolling through the final presentation. Ashworth signed off on most of these maintenance deferrals personally. I know. He's going to try to discredit you before you even open your mouth. I know that, too. Sandra looked at him. You're not scared? Marcus thought about it. I've driven through a blizzard at 2 a.m. on a mountain with no guardrails and bald tires. A room full of suits doesn't scare me. It should. These people can end your career with a vote.
They already tried that once. Sent me a letter. Called me redundant.
He looked at her. I'm still here. Sandra smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd seen in this building from anyone other than Elena. Thursday morning. Marcus put on his button-down shirt, his cleanest jeans, and his boots. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and saw what he always saw. A tired man trying to do right by his daughter and by himself. Nothing more, nothing less. Zoe appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. You look fancy, Daddy. You think so? You should wear a tie. I don't own a tie, baby girl. She disappeared and came back with a ribbon from her craft box. Purple, with little silver stars on it. Use this. Marcus knelt down and let her tie it around his collar in a clumsy bow. It looked ridiculous. He loved it. Now you're ready, she said. He kissed her forehead. Now I'm ready. He drove to headquarters with a purple ribbon around his neck and a presentation on a flash drive that could either save his career or end it. The star blanket sat folded on the passenger seat, the way it always did now. He didn't know why he kept it there. Maybe it reminded him that even the worst nights eventually break into morning. He parked, walked in, and took the elevator to the top floor. The boardroom was full. 12 members sat around the long table. Ashworth was at one end, papers stacked in front of him, his expression set in stone. Elena sat at the other end, calm, watching. Marcus took the empty chair in the middle. He set his flash drive on the table. Ashworth spoke first. Before we begin, I want the record to reflect that this review was requested due to concerns about operational overreach by a recently appointed supervisor who lacks the experience and qualifications typically required for his position. Marcus didn't flinch. He'd heard worse. Elena said, Noted. Mr. Cole, the floor is yours.
Marcus stood up. He looked around the table at 12 faces, some curious, some hostile, some blank. He plugged in the flash drive. The first slide appeared on the screen behind him. "My name is Marcus Cole," he said. 3 weeks ago, I was a truck driver. Before that, I was a truck driver for 12 years. Before that, I was a kid in South Memphis, watching my mother work 3 jobs so I could eat dinner every night. I don't have a degree. I don't have an MBA. I have 214 drivers in the Western Corridor who trusted me enough to tell me the truth. And the truth is, this company is bleeding from the inside. He clicked to the next slide. The numbers filled the screen. In the last 3 years, maintenance deferrals in the Western Corridor increased 40%. Driver injuries doubled. Turnover hit 3 times the industry average.
We lost $2.4 million in recruiting, training, and workers' comp claims. And one dispatcher falsified over 16,000 miles of records, stealing wages from drivers who were already underpaid. He paused and looked directly at Ashworth. These aren't complaints. These are facts. And every single one of them was preventable. The room was silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. He clicked through 6 more slides. Each one told a piece of the story. Broken trucks, exhausted drivers, a system designed to extract maximum output from human beings while investing nothing in return. When he finished, he closed the laptop and stood there with his hands at his sides. "You can fire me," he said. "You can call me unqualified, redundant, a charity project. I've heard it all in 3 weeks. But you cannot look at these numbers and tell me I'm wrong. And you cannot look at the men and women who drive your trucks through storms and over mountains and tell them they don't matter." He sat down. The silence lasted 8 seconds. It felt like 8 years. Then Sandra Voss spoke. "I move to approve Mr. Cole's operational recommendations for immediate review and implementation." A board member Marcus didn't know seconded the motion. Ashworth's face was unreadable. He looked at the numbers on the screen, then at Elena, then at Marcus. "All in favor?" Elena said. 9 hands went up, then a 10th, then Sandra's. Ashworth didn't raise his hand, but he didn't speak against it either. He sat there, watching Marcus with an expression that had shifted from contempt to something more complicated. Not respect, not yet, but the beginning of something that might become it, given enough time and enough proof. "Motion carries," Elena said. "Mr. Cole, you have full operational authority. Use it well." Marcus nodded. His throat was tight. He didn't trust his voice, so he just nodded again. As the board members filed out, Elena caught his eye across the room. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The look she gave him said everything. Marcus walked back to his office, closed the door, and sat down at his desk. He looked at the nameplate. Then he looked out the window at the loading docks where drivers were fueling up, checking tires, climbing into cabs for another long night on the road. His people. That's what they were now. His people. He picked up the phone and called Carl Jeffries. "Carl, it's Cole." "Well?" "We got it. Everything in the report. They approved it. Maintenance, mileage audits, scheduling reform. All of it." Carl was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was thick. "You're not messing with me." "I'm not messing with you." 30 years, Cole. 30 years I've been waiting for someone in that building to give a damn. The wait's over. Marcus hung up, leaned back in his chair, and let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for 12 years. On his collar, Zoe's purple ribbon with the little silver stars caught the light from the window. And for the first time since he'd walked into this building, Marcus Cole felt like he belonged. The morning after the board vote, Marcus arrived at the office before anyone else. He sat at his desk in the quiet dark and wrote a list on a legal pad. Not tasks, not priorities. Names. Every driver who'd talked to him on the phone. Every man and woman who'd trusted him enough to say what was broken. He wrote their names by hand because a spreadsheet didn't feel right. These weren't data points. They were people, and he'd made them a promise. He started with the trucks. By 9 a.m., he'd pulled the maintenance logs for every rig in the Western Corridor and flagged the 23 worst. Some of them shouldn't have been on the road at all. Unit 227, the one with the grinding brake caliper, had been flagged by 3 different drivers over 8 months. Each time, the work order was submitted, approved, and then quietly canceled by dispatch. Marcus traced the cancellations back to Jensen, the same dispatcher who'd been falsifying mileage. He called Elena. Jensen didn't just steal miles. He canceled safety repairs to keep trucks on the road and hit his dispatch targets. He was padding his performance numbers with other people's lives. Elena's voice was controlled, but Marcus could hear the steel underneath. Pull every record, everything Jensen touched. I'm bringing legal in today. There's more. 2 of the canceled repairs were on trucks involved in accidents. Minor ones, no fatalities. But the injury claims were filed without anyone connecting them to the deferred maintenance. Who signed off on the claims? Ashworth's office. The silence on the other end lasted 4 seconds. Send me everything. And Marcus, document every step. If this goes where I think it's going, I need a chain that holds up. Marcus spent the next 3 days buried in files. Sandra Voss helped him cross-reference maintenance records with dispatch logs, and what they found was worse than either of them expected. Jensen had been operating for nearly 4 years, skimming miles, canceling repairs, and filing false reports that made his corridor look like the most efficient in the company. On paper, he was a star employee. In reality, he was a fraud who'd put dozens of drivers at risk. Thursday afternoon, Jensen was terminated. He walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box and threatening lawsuits. Marcus watched from his office window as the man crossed the parking lot, got into his car, and drove away. Sandra appeared in his doorway. "You okay?" "Fine. Just thinking." About the fact that 14 drivers reported Jensen over 4 years, and nobody listened until a guy who's been here 3 weeks pulled the records. Sandra leaned against the frame. The system wasn't built to listen. It was built to produce. People like Jensen thrive in systems like that because nobody's looking down. They're all looking up. Well, I'm looking down now, and I don't like what I see. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Marcus's life, and not because of the work. The work was grueling. 18-hour days rebuilding schedules, negotiating with maintenance vendors, training new dispatchers. But it was honest labor, and Marcus knew honest labor. What wore him down was the resistance. Ashworth didn't fight openly after the board vote. He was too smart for that. Instead, he fought in ways Marcus couldn't always see. Delayed approvals, misrouted emails, meetings scheduled at times Marcus wasn't informed about until they were over. It was a slow, grinding campaign designed to exhaust rather than defeat. Marcus noticed it first when a purchase order for brake parts sat unsigned for 6 days. He walked to Ashworth's office and knocked. "Come in." Marcus entered. Ashworth sat behind a desk twice the size of Marcus's, reading something on his laptop with the unhurried patience of a man who'd been in power long enough to confuse it with permanence. "The brake parts order," Marcus said, "for units 227, 314, and 189. It's been sitting in your queue for almost a week." Ashworth didn't look up. "I've been prioritizing the Q2 budget review. Routine maintenance orders are processed in sequence." "These aren't routine. These are the flagged units from my report, the ones I presented to the board. And they'll be processed in sequence."
Marcus stepped closer to the desk. Mr. Ashworth, I'm not going to pretend we're friends. I know you didn't want me here. I know you think I'm in over my head.
But those trucks are carrying human beings through mountain passes in the middle of winter. And every day those parts sit unsigned is a day I'm responsible for someone's safety on a rig that isn't safe. Ashworth finally looked up. His expression was calm, almost pleasant. Mr. Cole, I've been running operations at this company since before you had a commercial license. I don't need a lecture on driver safety from a man who was sleeping in a truck cab a month ago. Then sign the order. Their eyes locked. Marcus didn't blink. He'd stared down worse than Gerald Ashworth. He'd stared down freezing highways and empty bank accounts and the look on his daughter's face when he missed her birthday 2 years in a row. Ashworth held the gaze for 5 seconds, then reached for a pen and signed the purchase order with a single, irritated stroke. There. Anything else? That's all I needed. Marcus took the signed form and walked out. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. From the effort of holding back everything he wanted to say, but knew he couldn't. Not yet. Not until his position was unshakable. He called Elena from the hallway. Ashworth signed the parts order, but he's going to keep doing this. Every approval, every purchase, every decision. He's going to drag his feet and hope I give up. I know. So what do I do? You don't give up. That's not a strategy, Elena. That's a bumper sticker. She laughed. It caught him off guard. A real laugh, warm and unguarded. Fair enough. Here's the strategy. I'm restructuring the approval chain. Starting next week, operational safety orders go through Sandra Voss, not Ashworth. He won't like it, but it's within my authority as owner. He'll see it as a demotion. He'll see it as a threat. And he'll respond. But by then, the repairs will already be done, the drivers will already be safer, and the numbers will already be moving in the right direction. Gerald is smart enough to read a trend line. When the results start showing, he'll either get on board or he'll leave. And if he does something worse? Like what? Like going to the board behind your back, building a case to remove you. Elena was quiet for a moment. He's already trying. I have allies on the board, but not a majority. If Ashworth can show the restructuring is costing more than it's saving in the short term, he could make a case for reversal. Then we need results fast. We need results real. 2 weeks later, the first wave of repairs was complete. 23 trucks pulled off the road, serviced, and returned. Marcus personally inspected every one of them. He drove Unit 227 himself, taking it through a test run on the highway outside Denver. The brakes were tight. The steering was true. It drove the way a truck should drive, like something you could trust with your life. When he got back to the yard, 3 drivers were waiting for him. Carl Jeffries was one of them. You actually did it, Carl said. Said I would. Yeah, but people say a lot of things in this business. You're the first one who meant it. The other 2 drivers, younger men Marcus didn't know well, stood behind Carl, looking at Marcus like he was something they hadn't seen before. He wasn't sure what that something was until one of them spoke. My wife told me to quit last month, the young driver said. His name was Devin, 26, 2 kids. She said nobody at this company cares whether I come home alive. I almost listened to her. What changed? Marcus asked. Carl called me. Said there's a new guy at HQ who used to drive. Said things were changing. I didn't believe him, but I figured I'd give it another week. Devin looked at Unit 314, freshly repaired, gleaming in the yard. My truck doesn't pull right anymore. No, it doesn't. Thank you, Mr. Cole. Marcus. Just Marcus. Devin nodded. He looked like he wanted to say more, but didn't have the words. He shook Marcus's hand instead, a grip that said everything his voice couldn't, and walked back to his rig. Carl watched him go. You know what you've done, right? Fix some trucks? No,
You've given these boys hope. And hope's a dangerous thing in this business, because if you break it, they'll never trust anyone again. I'm not going to break it, Carl. I believe you. Just make sure you remember that when the suits start pushing back. Marcus carried that conversation with him for days. It sat beside him in meetings, rode with him on his drive home, echoed in the quiet of his apartment after Zoe fell asleep. Hope. He'd given people hope, and now he was responsible for it. Zoe's surgery was scheduled for the first Tuesday in March. Marcus had taken the day off, his first day off since starting the new position. He drove her to the hospital at 6 a.m., holding her hand in the elevator, answering her questions with a calm he didn't feel.
Will it hurt, Daddy? Maybe a little, but the doctors are really good. And when it's done, you're going to hear everything. Every bird, every song, every word your teacher says. Even the boring words? He laughed. Even those. Will you be here when I wake up? I'll be the first thing you see. The procedure took 2 hours. Marcus sat in the waiting room with his hands clasped between his knees, staring at the floor. Denise had offered to come, but he'd said no. This was something he needed to do alone, the way he'd done everything alone for the past 5 years. His phone buzzed, a text from Elena. Thinking of you and Zoe today. She's going to do great. He typed back, Thank you for everything, not just today. You earned everything, Marcus. Remember that. He put the phone down and waited. 2 hours felt like 2 centuries. Every time a door opened, his head snapped up. Every time a nurse walked past, his heart hammered. Then the surgeon came out. A tall woman with kind eyes and steady hands. Mr. Cole? He stood up so fast, the chair scraped the floor. Yes, how is she? She's perfect. The procedure went exactly as planned. She's waking up now. Marcus's knees almost buckled. He braced himself against the wall. Can I see her? Follow me. He walked into the recovery room and found Zoe lying on a bed that was too big for her, a bandage over her left ear, her eyes half open. She looked small and fragile and perfect. Daddy? I'm here, baby. I can hear the beepy machine. He laughed. His eyes were burning. Yeah? What does it sound like? Annoying. He sat down beside her and took her hand. It was warm and tiny in his. You did so good, Zoe. So brave. Was I braver than you in the snowstorm? He looked at her, surprised. What snowstorm? Miss Denise told me you drove through a really big snowstorm and saved a lady. She said you were really brave. Marcus made a mental note to have a word with Denise about storytelling. I wasn't brave. I was just doing what needed to be done. That's what brave is, Daddy. He stared at his 7-year-old daughter and realized she was smarter than every person in every boardroom he'd ever sat in. Yeah, he said quietly. I guess it is. He stayed at the hospital until Zoe was discharged that evening. He carried her to the truck, buckled her in, and drove home slowly, taking every turn gently, treating the road like it was made of glass. She fell asleep before they reached the apartment, her head tilted against the star blanket he'd draped over her shoulder. He carried her inside, laid her in bed, and stood in the doorway watching her breathe. The bandage on her ear was small, but what it represented was enormous. She was going to hear clearly. She was going to sit in class and catch every word. She was going to grow up without the silent weight of the world fading around her. And it happened because a man stopped his truck in a blizzard. Marcus closed her door gently and went to the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water and sat at the table in the dark. He thought about the chain of events, the termination letter, the storm, Elena in the car, the thermos of coffee, the star blanket, the job offer, the board vote, the repairs,
the surgery. Each link connected to the last, forged by a single decision made at 2 a.m. on a frozen mountain road. He could have driven past. He almost did. For 3 seconds, he'd sat in that cab and calculated the cost of stopping. The lost time, the risk, the deadline he couldn't afford to miss. 3 seconds where logic said keep going, and something deeper said stop. He stopped, and everything changed. His phone rang. He checked the screen. Ashworth. Marcus frowned. Ashworth had never called him directly. He answered. "Cole?" "Mr. Cole, this is Gerald Ashworth. I apologize for the late hour. What do you need?" A pause. Ashworth's voice, when it came, was different than Marcus had ever heard it. Stripped of its usual polish, almost human. "I received the Q1 preliminary numbers tonight. Western Corridor driver retention is up 22% since your changes took effect. Injury claims are down by 1/3. Operating costs have decreased despite the increased maintenance spending because, as you pointed out, we're not hemorrhaging money on turnover and litigation anymore." Marcus waited. "I owe you an apology," Ashworth said. The words came out stiff, like a man speaking a language he'd never learned. "I didn't believe you were qualified for this role. I thought Miss Hargrove was making a sentimental decision based on personal gratitude. I was wrong." Marcus let the silence sit for a long moment. Not to punish Ashworth, but because he needed time to decide what to do with this. He'd been dismissed, undermined, and called a charity project by this man. An apology didn't erase that. But Marcus thought about his mother. The world is cold enough. Don't you add to it. "I appreciate you calling, Mr. Ashworth." Gerald. Gerald. "I'm not going to pretend the last few weeks haven't been difficult. You made them harder than they needed to be." "I know. But I didn't come into this building to make enemies. I came here to take care of drivers. If you want to help me do that, I'll work with you. If you don't, I'll work around you. Either way, the work gets done." Another pause. "I spent 22 years protecting the way this company operated. I convinced myself the systems we had were working because they produced results on paper. I didn't look at what those results cost the people on the ground. Nobody did. You did. From a truck cab in a snowstorm, you saw what I couldn't see from this office." Marcus closed his eyes. He was exhausted. His daughter was asleep with a fresh bandage on her ear. A man who'd tried to destroy his career was offering something that sounded like respect. The world didn't make sense tonight, and he was too tired to force it to. "We can talk more Monday," Marcus said. "Right now, I need to rest." "Of course. Good night, Mr. Cole." "Good night, Gerald." He hung up and sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside, its headlights briefly sweeping across the ceiling. Somewhere in the apartment, Zoe's nightlight glowed lavender through the crack beneath her door. Marcus thought about the word Ashworth had used. Sentimental. He'd said Elena made a sentimental decision. And maybe he was partly right. Maybe the blizzard had created a bond that opened a door that wouldn't have opened otherwise. But what Marcus had walked through that door and done with the opportunity wasn't sentimental. It was work. Hard, unglamorous, relentless work. The same kind of work he'd done behind a steering wheel for 20 years. The difference was that now people could see it. He thought about what Carl Jeffries had said. Hope is a dangerous thing. And he thought about Devon, the young driver whose wife wanted him to quit, and the 14 men and women who'd cried on the phone because someone finally asked them what they needed. He thought about Elena standing at that boardroom window, the woman who'd shivered in his truck and now commanded a company. She'd taken a chance on him, not out of charity and not out of guilt. She'd looked at a man the world had overlooked and decided he was worth betting on. Marcus finished his water, set the glass in the sink, and walked to Zoe's room one more time. He pushed the door open and listened. Her breathing was even, strong, and in the quiet of the room, he could almost hear the difference already. The world opening up for her, sound by sound, the way a road opens up after a storm. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "We made it, baby girl," he whispered. She stirred, but didn't wake. Her small fingers curled around the edge of the star blanket, holding on the way children hold on to the things that make them feel safe. Marcus stepped back and closed the door. He walked to his bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and pulled out his phone. He opened the text thread with Elena. He stared at it for a minute, trying to find words for what he was feeling. Gratitude, exhaustion, something close to peace. He typed, "Zoe's surgery went well. She's sleeping. She can hear the machines beeping, and she says they're annoying." Elena's reply came in 30 seconds. "That's the best thing I've heard all week. Get some rest, Marcus. You've earned it." He set the phone on the nightstand, lay back, and stared at the ceiling. For 20 years, the road had been his home. The cab of a truck, the hum of an engine, the white lines disappearing under his wheels. That was where Marcus Cole lived. Not in an apartment, or an office, or a boardroom. On the road. But tonight, lying in the quiet dark, listening to his daughter breathe through a door he didn't have to be 800 miles away from, Marcus realized the road had been leading him here all along. Not to a destination, to a place where he could finally stop driving and just be still. 3 months changed everything and nothing. Everything because North Hall Logistics was becoming a different company. Nothing because Marcus Cole was still the same man he'd always been. Early to rise, last to leave, carrying the weight so other people didn't have to. Spring came to Denver the way it always did, slowly and without apology. The snow melted off the mountains in long rivulets that turned the highways slick and shining. Drivers who'd spent the winter white-knuckling through ice and darkness started rolling down their windows, letting warm air into cabs that had been sealed tight for months. Marcus felt the shift in the company before the numbers confirmed it. Drivers were staying. Not just staying, talking. For the first time in years, the break rooms at North Hall terminals weren't silent. Men who'd spent decades keeping their heads down were speaking up, filing reports, suggesting improvements. Because someone had finally shown them that speaking up didn't mean getting fired. Carl Jeffries called Marcus every Friday evening. It had become a ritual neither of them acknowledged or questioned. Carl would call, Marcus would answer, and they'd talk for 20 minutes about everything and nothing. The roads, the weather, the rookies coming up, the ones who reminded them of themselves. "Got a kid on my corridor," Carl said one Friday. "Name's Andre, 23. Just had his first baby. Boy drives like he's got something to prove." "He probably does. Reminds me of you. Same look in his eye. Like the world told him no so many times he stopped asking permission." Marcus smiled. "Send him to the next training session. I want to meet him." "Already signed him up. Oh, and Cole?" "Yeah? The new dispatcher you hired, Garcia. She's good, real good. Caught a scheduling error last week that would have put 2 trucks on the same mountain pass in a storm window. Old system would have missed it. That's why I hired her. That's why the boys are starting to believe this thing might actually work." Marcus hung up and sat in his office, looking at the wall. He'd pinned a map of the Western Corridor there on his first day. Every terminal, every rest stop, every mile of highway he'd driven for 12 years. Red pins marked the locations of the 23 trucks he'd pulled for emergency repairs. Green pins marked the terminals where new safety protocols were in place. The red was slowly being replaced by green, but there was still more red than he liked. His door was open, the way he kept it. Elena appeared in the frame, knocking twice on the wood, even though she owned the building and every piece of furniture in it.
Got a minute?
For you? Several. She sat across from his desk. She looked different than she had 6 months ago. Not physically. She still carried herself with that quiet authority Marcus had noticed, even in the blizzard. But there was something lighter about her now. Less guarded. Like the weight of inheriting a broken company was slowly shifting from her shoulders to the system she was building to hold it. "Board meeting next week," she said. 6-month review. They're going to want numbers. I've got numbers. I know you do. But I need to prepare you for something. Ashworth is retiring. Marcus leaned back. Retiring? Or being retired? His choice. He called me last night. Said he's been thinking about it since your board presentation. His words were, and I'm quoting, "The company needs people who see what I couldn't. I've done my time." That's generous of him. It's honest. Gerald was never a bad man.
He was a product of a system that rewarded efficiency over empathy. When you showed the board what that cost in human terms, it forced him to confront 22 years of decisions he'd made without ever looking a driver in the eye. I looked him in the eye. I know. That's why he's retiring. Not because you defeated him, because you showed him what he'd missed, and he couldn't unsee it. Marcus thought about the phone call from Ashworth. The stiff apology, the admission, the way the man's voice had cracked, just barely, when he said the word wrong. Who's replacing him? Elena held his gaze. I want it to be you. The words landed in the room like a dropped stone. Marcus stared at her. Chief Operating Officer. You. Elena, I've been in this building for 6 months. And in those 6 months, you've done more for this company than Gerald did in his last 5 years. Driver retention is up 31%. Injury claims have dropped by half. We've saved $1.8 million in turnover costs alone. The Western Corridor went from the worst-performing division to the most improved in the company. That's not just me. That's Sandra. That's Garcia. That's Carl and Devin and every driver who decided to trust the process. And who built the process, Marcus? Who made those calls? Who stood in a boardroom wearing his daughter's purple ribbon and told 12 executives the truth they didn't want to hear? Marcus looked down at his hands. The same rough, calloused hands that had gripped a steering wheel for 20 years. The hands that had pulled Elena from a frozen car. The hands that had held his daughter's tiny fingers in a hospital recovery room. I need to think about it. I expected you to say that. It's a big job. It's the job you've already been doing. I'm just giving it the right title. She stood and walked to the door, then paused. Marcus, when I was sitting in your truck that night, freezing, scared, and lost, you didn't hesitate. You didn't weigh the pros and cons. You just did what needed to be done. Don't overthink this. You already know the answer. She left. Marcus sat alone in his office until the building emptied. The cleaning crew came through, vacuuming the hallways, and he barely noticed. He was thinking about something his mother had told him when he was 16, the day he came home from school furious because a guidance counselor had told him trucking was a fine career for someone like him. His mother had sat him down at the kitchen table, taken his face in her hands, and said, Marcus, people are going to spend your whole life telling you what you are. Your job is to show them what you can be. Not with words, with what you do when they're not looking. She died 3 years later. Breast cancer. Fast and cruel. Marcus had been 19, alone, angry at a world that took the one person who'd ever believed in him. He'd gotten his CDL at 20, climbed into a truck, and started driving. Not toward anything, away from everything. 24 years later, he was sitting in a corner office being offered the second highest position in a company that had tried to fire him 6 months ago. He picked up his phone and called Denise. "Hey, it's Marcus. How's Zoe?" "She's great. She's in the backyard catching fireflies. Hold on." A rustle, then footsteps on grass, then that voice. "Daddy, I caught 4 fireflies. Miss Denise says they glow because they're showing off, but I think they glow because they're happy." "I think you might be right, baby." "Are you coming home soon?" "Real soon. Listen, Zoe, I need your advice on something." "My advice?" She said it with such seriousness that Marcus nearly laughed. "Yeah, someone offered Daddy a really big job, bigger than the one I have now. And I'm a little scared." "Why are you scared?" "Because it's a lot of responsibility, a lot of people counting on me, and I'm not sure I'm the right person." Zoe was quiet for a moment. Marcus could hear crickets in the background. Then she said, "Daddy, remember when I was scared to read my poem at school?" "I remember." "You told me that being scared doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means it matters." Marcus closed his eyes. 7 years old. His daughter was 7 years old, and she'd just handed him the answer he'd been sitting in the dark for 3 hours trying to find. "When did you get so smart?" he asked, his voice rough. "I got it from you." "Nah, baby. You got it from your grandma." He said goodnight to Zoe, hung up, and sat there 1 more minute. Then he opened a text to Elena and typed 2 words. "I'll do it." Her reply was instant. "I know." The announcement went out the following Monday. Marcus Cole, former long-haul truck driver, appointed Chief Operating Officer of North Haul Logistics. The email was brief and professional. The reaction was not. Within an hour, Marcus's phone was ringing non-stop. Drivers, dispatchers, terminal managers, people he'd worked with, people he'd never met, all calling to say the same thing in different ways. "It's about time. You deserve this. Don't forget us up there." Carl Jeffries didn't call. He showed up, walked right into the corporate building in his trucker boots and denim jacket, past the receptionist, up the elevator, and into Marcus's office without knocking. "COO," Carl said, looking around the office. "They give you a bigger chair?" "Same chair." "Good. Don't let them change your chair." He sat down heavily and looked at Marcus with an expression that was equal parts pride and warning. "Listen to me. I've been driving trucks for 30 years. I've seen good men go into buildings like this and come out different. Softer, quieter. They start wearing ties and forgetting what diesel smells like." "I don't own a tie, Carl." "I'm serious. You're going to sit in meetings with people who've never changed a tire in their lives. They're going to talk about human capital and operational leverage and cost per mile. And every time they do, I need you to remember that those numbers are people. Living, breathing people, with kids and mortgages and bad backs. I won't forget. Your mother wouldn't let you." Marcus looked at him sharply. "How do you know about my mother?" Carl smiled. "You talk about her every time you think nobody's listening. At truck stops, on the CB. I've been hearing your voice on the radio for 12 years, Cole. I know more about you than you think." Marcus shook his head slowly. 12 years on the same corridor, and we never once sat in the same room until now. That's how it works out here. We're all driving parallel, right next to each other, never touching. Takes something like a blizzard to make two roads cross. Carl stood up and extended his hand. Marcus took it. The grip was firm, calloused, real. "Make us proud," Carl said. "I will." Carl walked out. Marcus heard his boots echoing down the hallway, heavy and sure. The sound of a man who'd spent his life carrying things that nobody thanked him for. The 6-month board review came on a Thursday. Marcus stood at the head of the table. The same table where he'd sat trembling in a folding chair 6 months ago, with a flash drive and a prayer. This time, he stood. He presented the numbers without slides. He didn't need them. He knew every figure by heart, because each one represented a person he'd talked to, a problem he'd solved, a truck he'd pulled off the road before it hurt someone. Driver retention, up 31%. Injury claims, down 48%. Operating costs, down 12%, despite increased maintenance spending. Employee satisfaction scores, a metric North Hall had never tracked before Marcus insisted on it, were the highest in the company's 40-year history. When he finished, the room was quiet. Then Sandra Voss started clapping. One person joined, then another, then the whole table. Marcus didn't smile. He nodded once, sat down and said, "We're not done. We're not even close." The board approved his full restructuring plan unanimously. After the meeting, Elena found him in the hallway. She was holding something, a framed photograph. She turned it so Marcus could see. It was the photo from the break room at the Denver terminal. Big Bill Hargrove, standing next to his first truck 40 years ago. A large man with rough hands and a face that had seen too much weather. He looked like a man who'd driven every mile of the road he'd built. "I want you to have this," Elena said. "Elena, I can't take that. That's your father." "My father started this company with one truck and a handshake. He believed that the people who do the hardest work deserve the most respect. Somewhere along the way, this company forgot that. You reminded us." Marcus took the photograph. He looked at Big Bill's face and saw something familiar in it. Not the features, but the expression. The look of a man who carried more than cargo. "I'll hang it in my office," Marcus said. "He would have liked you." "You think so?" "I know so." He had a saying, "The road tests everyone, but it only rewards the ones who stop for strangers." Marcus stared at her. "He said that?" "Every time someone asked him how he built this company." Marcus held the frame against his chest for a moment, feeling the weight of it. Not the glass and wood. The legacy. The chain of people who believed that kindness wasn't weakness. That stopping for a stranger wasn't a delay, but an investment in something larger than yourself. "Thank you, Elena." "Thank you, Marcus, for stopping." Summer arrived, and with it, the kind of long golden evenings that make Colorado feel like the center of the world. Marcus left the office at 5 every day now, non-negotiable. He'd told Elena on his first day as COO, "I'll give this company everything I have between 8 and 5. After that, I belong to my daughter." Elena hadn't argued. Zoe was thriving. Her hearing had improved dramatically since the surgery. She'd moved from the front row to the middle of her classroom, by choice, not necessity. Her teacher called Marcus to tell him that Zoe had started raising her hand more, answering questions she'd previously missed, laughing at jokes she'd only half heard before. "She's a different kid," the teacher said. "She's the same kid," Marcus replied. "She just doesn't have to fight as hard to be heard." One Saturday afternoon in July, Marcus took Zoe to the North Hall training lot. He'd been planning something for weeks and hadn't told anyone except Sandra, who'd helped him set it up. The lot was full 40 drivers, their families, kids running between parked rigs. Barbecue grills smoked near the warehouse. Someone had set up a speaker playing old R&B. It was the first ever North Hall Family Day, an event Marcus had proposed to the board as part of his employee engagement initiative. The board had approved a modest budget. Marcus had doubled it out of his own pocket. Carl Jeffries was there with his wife, a sturdy woman named Ruth, who shook Marcus's hand and said, "So you're the one who finally got my husband to stop cursing about his job at dinner." "I wouldn't go that far," Marcus said. "I would," Ruth replied. "First time in 30 years he came home and said something nice about that company. I almost called the doctor." Devin was there too, holding his baby girl on one hip and a plate of ribs in the other hand. His wife stood beside him, the same wife who'd told him to quit. She was laughing at something another driver's wife had said, and Devin watched her with an expression of quiet disbelief, like he'd been given something he thought he'd lost. Zoe ran through the crowd with a sparkler, weaving between adults and trucks and folding chairs. Her braids bounced, the pink beads catching sunlight. She found Marcus near the barbecue and grabbed his hand. "Daddy, can I sit in a truck?" "Which one?" "The biggest one." He walked her over to Unit 227, the same truck that had been running on a grinding brake caliper for 8 months. The same truck Marcus had driven on the test run after it was repaired. It gleamed in the lot, freshly washed, its chrome catching the Colorado sun. He lifted Zoe up into the cab. She sat behind the steering wheel, her feet dangling a full 2 feet above the pedals, her hands gripping the wheel with a seriousness that made Marcus's chest ache.
"This is where you used to work?" she asked.
"For a long time."
"Was it lonely?"
Marcus leaned against the door, looking at his daughter in the driver's seat of the life he'd left behind. "Sometimes, yeah, it was lonely."
"Are you still lonely?"
"No, baby, not anymore." She turned the wheel back and forth, making engine noises with her mouth.
"When I grow up, can I drive a truck?"
"You can do anything you want."
"Even be the boss?"
He smiled. "Especially that." She climbed down, took his hand again, and pulled him back toward the barbecue.
"Come on, Daddy. Mr. Carl saved you a plate."
They ate together. Marcus, Zoe, Carl, Devin, Sandra, Garcia, and a dozen others. Sitting on tailgates and overturned crates, paper plates balanced on their knees. The conversation was easy, loose, the kind that only happens when people feel safe enough to let their guard down. As the sun started to drop, Elena arrived. She'd been invited, but hadn't confirmed, and Marcus had assumed she wouldn't come. But there she was, walking across the lot in jeans and a simple white blouse, looking nothing like a CEO, and everything like a woman who belonged here. Zoe spotted her first.
"Daddy, who's that?"
"That's Elena. She's the one who gave Daddy the new job."
"The one from the snowstorm?"
"The one from the snowstorm." Zoe broke away and ran toward Elena before Marcus could stop her. She skidded to a halt in front of the woman and looked up at her with wide, serious eyes.
"You're the lady my daddy saved."
Elena knelt down to Zoe's level.
"I am. And your daddy's blanket, the one with the stars, kept me warm all night. I picked that blanket at the store because stars are the best. They really are. My daddy says you're really smart."
Elena glanced at Marcus, who was standing 10 feet away, trying very hard to look like he wasn't listening.
"Your daddy is the smart one. I just got lucky."
Zoe considered this. Then she reached out and took Elena's hand. "Come eat with us. Mr. Carl makes really good corn." Elena let herself be led. She sat on a crate between Zoe and Carl, eating corn and laughing at a story Devin was telling about a raccoon that had climbed into his cab at a rest stop in Nebraska. She looked happy. Not CEO happy, not public appearance happy, just happy. Later, as the families started packing up
and the first stars appeared over the mountains, Marcus stood alone by Unit 227. He rested his hand on the hood, feeling the warm metal beneath his palm. He thought about all the miles this truck had carried drivers through, all the storms, all the lonely nights. Elena walked over and stood beside him. They didn't speak for a long moment. The sky was turning purple and gold. "Your father was right," Marcus said. "About what?" "The road tests everyone, but it rewards the ones who stop." Elena looked at her. Her eyes were bright, reflecting the last of the sunlight. "He also said something else I never told you." "What?" "He said, the best people in this world don't know they're the best. That's what makes them the best." Marcus looked out at the lot. Carl was helping Ruth fold chairs. Devin was buckling his baby into a car seat. Sandra was throwing away paper plates. Zoe was sitting on a tire, drawing something in a notebook, her tongue sticking out in concentration the way it always did when she was making something she thought was important. These people, all of them. The ones who drove through storms and raised children alone and showed up every day to jobs that didn't see them. The ones who never asked for recognition because they were too busy holding the world together. His people. "I should get Zoe home," Marcus said. "Good night, Marcus." "Good night, Elena." He walked to where his daughter sat and looked over her shoulder. She'd drawn a picture, a big red truck on a snowy road. Next to the truck, a tall man with brown skin was holding the hand of a smaller figure with pink beads in her hair. Above them, she'd drawn stars, dozens of stars filling the entire sky. At the bottom, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, she'd written, "My daddy stops for people." Marcus picked her up. She wrapped her arms around his neck and rested her head on his shoulder, the way she'd done since she was small enough to carry with one arm. "Ready to go home, Zoe?" "Ready, Daddy." He carried her to the truck, buckled her in, and placed the star blanket over her lap. He climbed in, turned the key, and the engine hummed to life. The parking lot was almost empty now. The mountains stood dark against a sky full of stars. Marcus pulled out of the lot and turned toward home. The road stretched ahead, straight and clear, lit by headlights that cut through the warm summer night. Zoe fell asleep before they reached the first traffic light, her drawing clutched in one hand, the star blanket pulled to her chin. He drove slowly. No deadline, no dispatch call, no termination letter, no storm. Just a man and his daughter on a quiet road heading home. 20 years ago, Marcus Cole had climbed into a truck and started driving away from a life that had broken his heart. He'd driven through blizzards and darkness and loneliness so deep it felt like drowning. He'd been overlooked, underpaid, and finally discarded by a system that measured men in miles and dollars and nothing else. And then one night, on the worst road in the worst storm of the worst year of his life, he'd stopped. Not because anyone was watching, not because he expected anything in return, not because it was smart or strategic or safe. He stopped because a woman was freezing in a car on the side of the road, and his mother's voice in his head said what it always said. "The world is cold enough, Marcus. Don't you add to it." That single act, 3 seconds of decision on a frozen mountain highway, had changed the course of 2 lives, then 20, then 200, and was still rippling outward in ways he would never fully see. Drivers who stayed because someone listened. Trucks that ran safely because someone cared. A little girl who could hear the world clearly because her father's kindness had opened a door that money alone could never have unlocked. Marcus Cole didn't stop his truck that night because he was a hero. He stopped because he was a father, a son, A man who understood that the smallest thing you do for another person might be the biggest thing that ever happens to you. And the road, the long, hard, beautiful road, had proved him right.
Goodness, no matter how quiet, no matter how unseen, never goes unanswered. It is returned, not always quickly, not always obviously, but always. That is the one truth the highway teaches every man brave enough to stop when the world tells him to keep driving. Marcus Cole stopped, and everything changed.